evening, everyone. Welcome back to the Evermore YouTube channel. It's the Evermore podcast. I'm Chris, your host. I'm with the right couple of smug bastards here because they won't be home for tea. They're gonna tell you all about it, I'm sure, in a minute. He's going to get his suit measured. Odie's in the house, as you can see there. And we've got Lee from the block, but I won't tell you which block he's sitting in because you'll be stalking him and his lad. How we doing, lads? You okay?
Yeah,
It's been a good day today, hasn't it?
I bet it has, mate. I bet it has for you, mate. I just hope people in the comments haven't struggled, bless them, because we'll sharp be getting some tears in the comments. But we've got loads to get stuck into tonight. There's been a couple of breaking stories for the club as well, which obviously we'll get right into as well. We changed our agenda a little bit, but just before we do, a little bit of a reminder: if you haven't already, please click that like and subscribe button. We'd love you to come and join us. We're only 10 subscribers away from 2,500, which would be awesome. If you can help get us there, if you're brand new, smash that button. It takes you half a second. You'll not regret it. There's loads of good content here and Evermore, and new stories breaking every single week with Newcastle United. There's loads to talk about for us lot, as well as these two bragging about Wembley. And we're live as always, and people are already in the comments there. We've got a few of the regulars in. BT, got to give you a shout. You've been in right from the start, mate. You've been whacking some comments in about what we're going to get stuck into as well. So we'll pull them up as we get on. So we might as well jump into the first one then, lads. It's prime time. This has been a bit rumoured for a while, this has. So, Audie, coming to you, this might explain why your mate Idris Elba was in the crowd the other week, mate. Possibly people have said that. But I know you and Luther are really close, mate. But obviously the stories broke. Keith Downey whacked it on Twitter earlier on that the Amazon have been apparently rolling the cameras behind the scenes for one of their All or Nothing documentaries about Newcastle United, mate. And I've got my take on this, but I'm going to get your lads' take on it. How do you feel about it, mate? Do you think it's good, or do you think it's bad, or where do you sit with it all?
It's probably a little bit in the middle because it's the difficult stage where you don't really know who's behind it. Like, did Eddie want it, or is it just something that's kind of been the club have decided they're doing it and it's there? Is it a welcome or an unwelcome distraction? I mean, I'm sure we're all probably old enough to remember Premier Passions and Peter Reid throwing his teacups around the Sunderland dressing room and losing his temper as the Mackems managed to find a way to get relegated from quite a strong position halfway through the season. Not that we remember all of that with joy. But like shows like that really, and we've all sort of smiled away at Sunderland Till I Die on Netflix. But it depends on what it is. I thought the Man City documentary was brilliant. Actually, I don't think that was I'm not massively into rugby, but the New Zealand All Blacks one was absolutely brilliant. Their coverage of All or Nothing. If that's what it is and it's a coverage of it, that seems great. But Downey seemed to imply it was only 4 episodes, or that they'd signed up for only 4 episodes, which doesn't make it sound like an All or Nothing. Who knows what actually it's going to be, what the coverage is, but what you hope is that the management and the players were all on board with doing it, and it's not something that's been thrust upon them, because if it's something that is, and then it starts to make a big story just before the League Cup final, it's probably a distraction we don't need.
Yeah, Lee, what's your take on it, Lee? Are you in a similar vein of Audie? Are you all for it, mate? We know you love the camera.
I'm quite torn. If I'm honest with you. Listen, it's going to be a 4-part documentary, and every single one of us is going to watch it. I don't think there's any doubt in that. But listen, from being a kid, I always had this imaginary perception of what it was like behind the scenes, what you call it, in the training ground, in the changing rooms and what have you. And I'm worried about that actually becoming reality and it not being quite what I expected when I was a kid as such. I want to have this vision that, what you call it, they're all sound lads and they're all fighting for each other and they're fighting for the badge and what have you. I don't want to know if Jacob Murphy's the biggest prima donna in the Premier League. I don't want to know if Harrison Ashby, what you call it, can't stand the sight of Kieran Trippier. So I don't know. I'm torn. I want to watch it, but I don't want to see things that potentially, what you call it, I might not be expecting. I mean, it does open up the opportunity of the club being ridiculed at points. Let's be honest. Who didn't piss themselves laughing at Mikel Arteta in the final episode of the Arsenal version, when he was in the changing room at St James's Park, giving them batshit because of the fact that we wanted it more than them? I watched that. I must have watched that on a loop for about a week afterwards. So
that's because you're sadistically, you spend all your time in Everton spaces laughing at those poor bastards.
Oh, come on, it was funny. It was funny. But that's the sort of thing you're opening yourself up to. You're opening yourself, the club, the fan base, up to a little bit of ridicule if things don't quite go as you want them to. On the flip side of it, from a commercial point of view, it's going to be huge for the club. I mean, listen, Arsenal, Tottenham, Juventus, they all got paid approximately £10 million for taking part in the All or Nothing series. £10 million not to be sniffed at, but the commercial avenues that it's going to open in terms of sort of global appeal to partners, investors and things like that. I mean, we talk about Castore a lot. Your Adidas and your Nike are going to be looking at that and thinking this is something we want to be part of. It's also going to be really interesting to see if it's been filmed over the course of the past 12, 13, 14 months since the club was taken over. It'd be really interesting to see the transformation behind the scenes. Will we see clips of Amanda Staveley opening a cupboard at Darsley Park in an inflatable paddling pool falling out? And then fast forward 14 months and you've got a new hydro pool, what you call it, at Darsley Park. So listen, to answer your question in a quick way, I'm really, really torn between looking forward to it and then potentially watching it through my fingers from behind the settee.
Yeah, I can't wait to see Eddie Howe like opening a fridge in like the manager's office and so just pulling out like 18 packs of bacon, going, "What's all this bacon doing here?" That would be class. If it's something like that, I'd absolutely love it. Got a comment there from Tifa Lee. Arsenal had the worst start of the season while it was filming, missed out on their main goal of Champions League, and it still came out as a massive positive for their club. So yeah, but I think that you touched on a bit of the players not liking each other as well, Lee. Or you mentioned, I think before, didn't you, that there's this story, rumours going around that maybe Trippier and Wilson aren't on the best of terms with each other. I mean, again, as Lee says, you don't want that to come out, do you? Because they're massive players for us. You don't want fans to think that these two kind of bear each other.
Yeah, that's one of the major things that could be a concern is how much they interact with each other at that stage. Yeah. And Lee's right. We don't want to know if Harrison Ashby isn't best mates with Matt Targett or whatever. Like, we're not really bothered at the moment.
Yeah.
There seems a real togetherness within the club. Everybody seems to be working together. This supposed situation between Wilson and Trippier, where they're not best mates with each other, whilst not a concern at the moment, could suddenly become something that is in the papers on a regular basis. And that's the last thing we want, is a negative spin on it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the same as you lads, to be honest with you. I think it's great from a commercial element. I am a little bit torn on other things as well, on top of what you guys had said. From an entertaining aspect, I'd love to see just a bit more of how maybe in Tyndall and that kind of dynamic that they have as well, and the kind of banter between them would be quite nice to see. If Jason Tyndall's got a sunbed as well in the training pitch, I'd just absolutely love that, to be fair. He just rocks in with the old shades on and whacks that tan up. But I think on a serious note, I'm a bit concerned as to I don't want to use the right word here, the truth seekers and the people looking to score points in the media, your Miguel Delaney's and these kind of guys. Once that comes out, once that drops, they'll all be on Good Morning Britons and BBC News is talking about how you're glorifying the Saudi ownership. And again, it's probably PR that we don't need. I know the club have obviously thought about that before they made these decisions. They brought in these really high-flying, commercial guys who have made loads of money for the clubs that they have been at previously, like Seville's and as Peter Silverstone, the new guy who came from Arsenal. So they've obviously thought about this long and hard, and they've looked at the risk assessment of it. But I just feel that even when the club was bought, we had the arbitration and all that stuff. All these guys came out to wash, and Howe still gets questions now, not as many as he used to because we're doing so well. And it's interesting, the better you do, the more the media are quiet in terms of about your ownership and all of the doom and gloom things behind the scenes. But I just feel that this might kick the genie's lamp, and these guys might come back out of the woodwork. Is that something you guys think may happen? Either one?
One thing I do think will happen is, and a positive that will come from it, there's a lot of, people wondering what the long-term vision for the club is. Do we see ourselves as a Manchester City sort of style growth project and what have you? That will absolutely come out in this series. It will. We'll get far, far better picture as to what the owners, whether it be Ruben, whether it be Staveley and Guendouzi, or even Al Ramayan over in Saudi, we'll get a far clearer picture as to what their long-term vision is. We're going to talk about it soon, about the Strawberry Place development. We will get to see firsthand, I think, the discussions around why they wanted to do what's come to light today and what their plans for that land are. by the time it's broadcast, we might already have a picture, but it'll be really interesting to see how that was approached and what the discussions were about that vision and how it was put into place. So there's positives and negatives whichever way you look at it, but I'm really, really keen to see what their vision for Newcastle United is in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, because I think this will be a big part of it. They will want to tell the world, this is what we're looking to do. We're going to make it happen in this sort of time period. So that'll be a really interesting aspect of it.
Yeah, I mean, BT's making a good point there, Rory, as well. You can see Amanda enjoying the publicity, but Jamie's a bit more of a private person. I mean, you touched on Howe before, Rory, and you know, Howe seems to be, for me, he seems to want to keep a lot of the stuff in-house, you know, and he loves the fact that we've got this identity, you know, Intensity's identity and everything else. Obviously, he came out and he spoke very well on Humphrey's podcast, didn't he? And it was brilliant. That's a great watch. If anyone hasn't watched that, definitely check it out. But you mentioned about, has this been thrust upon him? My concern, Odie, is maybe if it has, you know, that could potentially end up with a bit of this between where the club want to go commercially and what Howe's vision is for the club. Do you think that's a risk as well, man?
I think anytime you unsettle the apple cart like this, or like you potentially upset the apple cart, and you take that risk of players or management knock them. I mean, Jack Rodwell must wish he'd never sat in that gym and given that interview where, are you fit for Saturday? Nah, mate. And then laughed and then walked out. Like, I mean, you know, could you imagine if we did, Isak, are you concussed? Nah, mate. He wanders off, like, not playing Saturday.
I'm off to IKEA.
Yeah, exactly. And I think just like to build on something Lee mentioned before, did you say it was 10 million, Lee, for the all or nothing thing? I think we've got to remember where we are with revenue streams. Like, most clubs are getting £40 million for the sponsor per season on the front of their strip. We're getting 7. Like that, and that is the average for a team that's maybe 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th in the Premier League. If we want to be competing with the big guys and we want to get FFP back in our favour, one of the things we have to do is find different revenue streams. We're getting more for Noon being on our arm. I think it's 7.5 million a year. We're getting more for that than we're getting for Fun 88 on the front of our shirt. And this 10 million might be a way of being able to afford Harrison Ashby and his wages within FFP, because we've got to be really honest. I know some people have already mentioned this, but we must be really, really close to what we can spend if we have, as reported, paid £40 million up front for Anthony Gordon, because that's massive. Like, and it's a real shock to the system. Going back to your point about Howe, though, if he didn't want it, I can't imagine the club would have gone ahead with it. If he was adamant it wasn't happening, I can't have seen them doing it.
Yeah, he's got a lot of credit in the bank, Lee, hasn't he, as Odie says there. And I think how well he's done with us, if he said, look, I don't want these cameras here, you tend to agree with Odie. Do you think they wouldn't have done it?
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think, as you say, the credit that Howe's got in the bank and the way things are going on the pitch and the way the club seems to be united and the way, let's be honest, universally, the fan base appear to love Howe, and rightly so, for what he's done. I think he's got enough power within that club now to turn around, similarly to the way potentially Arsene Wenger might have said 10 years ago to the Arsenal board, it's not happening. And the Arsenal board would have gone, fair enough, Arsene. I think Howe's in as strong a position now as Arsene Wenger was potentially 10 years ago at Arsenal. I think he has that much sway because of the way we are performing and because of the stock he's got with the supporters, that he would have been able to turn around and say, absolutely not, this isn't something I want. So I can't help but think that Howe has gone along with it. What we might find, it might not be a all or nothing style sort of documentary. What you might find this is more around the ownership model and the transformation behind the scenes, as more than you're seeing in terms of on the pitch. I watched the Man City one, which I thought was fantastic, but probably 60-70% of that is either in the changing rooms at the Etihad or in the changing rooms at Manchester City. This might be flipped. You might find this is 60, 70, 80% behind the scenes boardroom based and only the odd clip interlaced of on the field matters. Now, that's potentially something I could see happening, because it doesn't appear on the face of it being 4 episodes that it's going to be a full-blown all or nothing style, what do you call it, series.
Yeah, well, there's going to be a sequel for the Man City one. It's called Money for Nothing. The shit that they're in at the minute. So we'll keep an eye on that one because that could even have an impact.
Somebody today suggest it should be called Mags to Riches.
The Mags, a little bit cheesy, but I'm up for it. I must admit. But yeah, I mean, the City FFP thing could definitely have an impact on us. I did a video earlier on about that, guys. So check it out and let us know what you think about it. But speaking of money talks and bullshit walks, and thank God Mike Ashley walked. One of his parting shots. Stick with you on this one, Lee. One of his parting shots was to sell Strawberry Place before he pissed off into the sunset, counting his money. Something that, you know, if we needed any other reason to hate him for, that was another great reason to hate the guy for, because it almost seemed to prevent any expansion of the ground for any new owners. But the great news that's come out today in the Daily Mail, I think Craig Hope, your mate Craig Hope, put it in Audi, a brilliant story by saying that the new owners have now bought back Strawberry Place, and it kind of keeps that dream alive, Lee, doesn't it, of staying in our home, staying in the cathedral on the hill, expanding out and getting these like ridiculous 25,000 season ticket holders who some of them fucked off and got upset and want to come back. You know, these guys who didn't stick with it like you guys did. You know, the club needs it, doesn't it? Because we just got such a clamour for tickets, even before, you know, all the glitz and glamour. The clamour for tickets is already there, isn't it? So, you know, this is great news, isn't it?
This is as big an event or an announcement, in my opinion, that we've seen since the club was bought out in October 2021. I, as you know, I drive up from Scarborough every game with my lad, and one of the things I always look forward to is as I'm coming down the Felling bypass past Heworth Metro Station, and as you're coming down towards Gateshead, you look into the distance and you can see St James's Park. I mean, Saturday before West Ham, we're driving down Felling bypass, just past Heworth, and I said to my lad, and there she is. And you can see her just sat proudly atop of the city. Now, when we sold, Strawberry Place for 9 million, I think it was, back in 2019. The idea that he'd sold it for office blocks and hotels that would obscure that view, not just for me coming down the Felling bypass, but for everybody in the city, would obscure that view, so you would no longer have that. It was absolutely devastating. It really, really was. I think the news has been on the cards for a week or two now. I think we saw the mayor and Chionura a couple of weeks ago, and virtually announcing that any public funding had been withdrawn, and the company that had bought the land was already in financial difficulty. So I think it was on the horizon. I think it wasn't a surprise when it actually happened, but just getting the news today that it had actually been bought back into Newcastle United ownership, it was just really, really, it's a game changer for the club. I mean, you've heard rumours of plans around a fan zone and what have you. Now, if we want to become a super club, if you like, or the club of the North, this sort of thing is an absolute must. Anybody who's been to the Etihad in the last 3, 4, 5 years will see a day at Manchester City. It's an event outside of the stadium. It's not just you go to the ground, you go in the turnstile, you take in the match and you bugger off home. A match at Manchester City, it is an event for families, for kids and what have you. Outside the ground, you've got bars, you've got restaurants, you've got food stores, you've got giant screens putting on, highlights and things along those lines. Kids entertainment, kids taking pot shots at bouncy castle football goals and things along those lines. Now, as much as the atmosphere on Strawberry Place on a Saturday or a nighttime game is brilliant with a beatboxing bloody Spider-Man and the drummer and what have you, that would just take us to a different level. It would just take us to a different level. And if we want to become that super club that I think everybody wants us to become, that's the way we're going to have to start thinking. Going to a Newcastle game is going to have to become more than you just turn up at 2:30, take in the game and go home. It needs to turn into an event, if nothing else, but to secure the next generation of fans, to get them hooked when the 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old get dragged down there with the mums and dads. You'll have families who go down there, if we turn it into this giant fan zone as expected, who potentially don't even have a ticket. But they go down there to soak up the atmosphere around the ground because they know there's going to be things for the kids and what have you to do. And then you come on to the opportunities potentially for increasing the capacity of St James's Park. I never wanted to leave St James's, ever wanted to leave St James's. I just think it wouldn't feel right. It would appear now that the club's intentions are not to leave St James's, but to expand St James's. If you can imagine what St James's noise would be like, if we can add another 10, 12, 13,000 on top of that, it's just going to become somebody likened a potential extension to Dortmund's ground, the yellow wall. Black and white wall. It could be something like that if they extended the Gallagher back to the same height as level 7 and then turned the Gallagher into a safe standing stand. It said that the opportunities are limitless, both from a commercial point of view, from a future fan base point of view, from a revenue point of view. You can tell I've not shut up for about 3 minutes. I'm very excited by it.
I'm just waiting for Mark to clip this to the Titanic soundtrack. He's not on tonight, Mark. Bless him. He's got a bit of man flu, so get well soon, Mark. But yeah, he'll definitely clip that one, mate. But before I get Audie's opinion, mate, I hope you're not going to start cheating on locals in this fancy fan zone, drinking like a Steiner beer from some part of Berlin, and stop picking on poor Spider-Man. Stop picking on Spider-Man. He's Newcastle heritage. So, Audie, it's a great point, isn't it? I mean, I think the biggest worry for everybody was one time, down the line, do we do what Spurs have done, Arsenal have done, City have done, and do we leave St James's Park and do we get that new stadium? And not to sound arrogant or a little bit fantasiable, but as a fan base, our heart is in St James's Park, isn't it? It's right in the middle of the city. As Lee says there, you can see it from everywhere you turn. It's a core part of the city. To rip that out with all its heritage. I know people say you haven't won anything. It's not about that. It's about the memories and the affection for the stadium in the region. This has got to be good news, mate, rather than going to a new stadium, isn't it? To try and build out.
Yeah. I know a lot of people seem to have written different articles about or given different views on whether you can extend out across the road. I mean,
from a safety point of view, kind of a thing.
But I think it's been proved that you can do it. I mean, lots of other clubs have got. I think Monaco have got a car park. Ajax have got a motorway that goes under the state. You can do it. You can make it work. That's not an issue. The Strawberry Place thing is. The whole thing about it was really, really weird at the time because it was kept a bit hush-hush until planning permission went in front of the council, because I'm sure it was either Ashley's son-in-law or
someone mentioned that before.
Who was in charge of the business and who bought it for what was described as a well below market value fee, and then sold it, I think, within a matter of months for £9 million to a developer. And I know, Lee, you were saying that the developers obviously come into some financial difficulty or whatever and not being able to move on with the site. I find it really peculiar that we've got to that stage where that's going to be the driving force, because the only thing that concerns me, it being safe standing would make some sense, actually, from what Lee said before, because the Gallagher is the only way that can be extended out using that space. Those of us who sit in the East Stand and have done for a number of years are aware that it's very, very, very close to the houses behind. And barring some accident, which we hope would not happen, obviously, then the East Stand would not be able to be extended going backwards unless they changed the trajectory of the stand or the angle the stands were at. From what I understand, that's quite an expensive thing to do. I like the idea of the fan zone. I might start cheating on Loco if the fan zone opens up. But
because PK in the comments, he'll be furious at you two.
Well, you watch. He'll be fickle. He'll change as well if he finds out.
He'll be there.
But I think it's interesting that this is going to matter a lot more to people because of what it means longer term. We've gone from 5-6 years ago, the Sports Direct Arena at St James's Park, to now St James's Park being protected as it is and potentially being our ground for the next 10, 15 years. Could we sell it out if it had 60,000 seats? Yes, we probably could.
Massively.
Could we sell it out for 60, 70,000 seats? Yes, we probably could. The difference is, though, and I'm speaking here as someone who spent a long time, Lee, you'll be similar, spent a long time at the ground before the extension up to level 7. There is an element of the noise that was maintained within that bowl that was the 36,000 seater. Some of that got lost when we extended to 52,000. Now, I'm going to be honest, and when we talk later about Saturday's again was another game where I felt, oh, everyone's going to be bang up for this. The atmosphere is going to be brilliant. And it felt a bit like after the Lord Mayor's show. So maybe we do need to get to the stage where we've got the Gallow Wall Gate or whatever you want to call it. Like there is like a really big institution that we can carry on and carry on and carry on. Because the clamour for tickets is only, I mean, this week's proven the clamour for tickets and the irritation that people get when they don't get tickets is only going to increase the more successful that we become.
Absolutely. It's got to be called War Wall, surely, lads, isn't it? War Wall. It's got to just be called that. Nice and simple. Just give me a shout, War Flags. I can help that. But I think, as you lads both say, I mean, it just shows you the club is on the way up, really. And, you know, we're fighting at the top of the table right now. You know, yes, we could maybe talk a little bit about squad depth and everything else. But I think if we want to stay there, if we get Champions League football as well, and we suddenly become that team as well, having European fans coming like we used to be back in the day, all those stadiums now, as you lads have mentioned a couple of them there, you know, Monaco Stadium, San Siro, Ajax, those kind of things, they are built for bigger volumes of fans as well. So it won't just be our fans, it'll be the European fans coming over as well. So I think it's definitely something that had to be done. I'm so glad that the club have done it. You know, there will be some difficulties, I'm sure there will be some inconveniences, but I think in the long term, you know, it's short-term pain for long-term gain. I think it's, you know, in the next kind of 10 years, you know, I totally agree with what Lee was saying there. We will be one of those big elite clubs with those massive stadiums. And unlike the Etihad, it won't be like a library. I think it'll be a bit noisier, a bit more raucous, because I think the majority of fans who are going to fill that stadium will be Newcastle fans through and through, will be guys who maybe couldn't get a season ticket or left the season ticket and want to come back. There'll be a huge percentage of them will be from there. But as Lee said as well, you know, there'll be fans from, you know, like say Carlisle and places like that aren't too far away. That historically, these young kids of us want to support Man United, Liverpool, City. They're going to now be looking, going, you know what, I'm a Newcastle fan. And then they want to come to the ground, you know. So like Lee, they'll be traveling with their parents and stuff like that. So you've got to cater for these people in the future. And I think it's massively exciting, lads. Yeah, I'm really interested to see where the club goes with it. So from the new, I suppose, segued into a bit of the old, I suppose. We're going to bring it right down now for all this positivity, I suppose. We're going to talk a little bit about Alain Saint-Maximin as Lee's just gathering his thoughts there. I'll start with this. So obviously at the weekend, you mentioned already, West Ham came to town. It was a buzzing week for Newcastle United, probably the biggest week we've had in 25 years, really, through to the League Cup final, which you lads got tickets for, you jammy bastards. But not dwelling on that. But Saint-Maximin had to come in because of Bruno's red card. And it was a huge game for him. We were all hoping he was going to grab it and do something with it. And he was so poor. I mean, even Sky, I watched it on Sky, and they said he was really poor. Just before we get into Maxi and whether he fits the style of our team anymore, here's some of his stats of the weekend. So, 0 shots on target, 0 shots off target, 1 shot blocked, 2 dribbles, and only 1 was successful. 13 passes and only 65% passing accuracy, 0 key passes. Just for context, Anthony Gordon came on for 25 minutes, had 10 passes, 90% accuracy, 1 key pass. So I suppose throwing that over to, we'll start with you, Lee, on Maxi. I said this about Shelvey, and I love Shelvey. I think he's been a good servant for the club, but the club evolved, or the team evolved beyond Shelvey's game, and he couldn't keep up with the intensity. That's why his body kept breaking down. I think the same thing's happened with Maxi, and I don't think he can be as disciplined to play in this side and still do the bits that he does well. Am I being harsh, mate, or not? What do you think?
I'm Maxi's biggest critic. He is. I have been for a long time. But I think we're being a bit harsh on the lad. You were talking about stats. I've got some stats. Since the World Cup, he started 9 games on the bench and got 9 appearances from the bench. In those 9 games, he's had 193 minutes. He's had 1 start, which was on Saturday, and he got 69 minutes. Since the World Cup, he's played a total of 262 minutes following 8 games out through injury. Now, listen, I think if you go back to the start of the season, I said that this season was make or break for Maxi. I think I said it on one of the Evermore shows, Chris. I thought that he had to make his mark this season because he could no longer use the excuse that he was playing with Jeff Hendrick. He could no longer use the excuse that he was playing with Nabil Bentaleb. He had good world quality professionals around him, like your Brunos, your Botmans, your Trippiers, your Popes, and what have you. And he could no longer turn around and say, I'm the biggest fish in this pond and everything has to go through me. So I said at the start of the season, it's make a break for him. If he doesn't do it this season, he'll be away. He'll be fully off. If you think just before he got his injury, he would arguably have had his best game in a Newcastle shirt against Man City. I thought he was absolutely unbelievable that day in the 3-3 draw. The following game, he scored a goal of the season contender away to Wolves. Yeah, and was actually spotted sprinting back in the 93rd minute, and that's when he actually did his hamstring. Yeah, and then he was out for 8 weeks. And since then, as I say, he's had 10 appearances, 9 of which have been sub, and he's playing 15, 20, 7 minutes sometimes. I think the bloke needs a run of games. He had a run of games at the start of the season, and we saw what he could do against Man City, and we saw what he could do against Wolves. I'm very much of the opinion that this season's now passed him by due to injury and due to him not getting the game time. We go again next season with him fit and raring to go, because we all have seen signs that he is buying into Howe's ethic, his work ethic. There is a lot more, he's not taking the easier pass a lot more regularly. He is working a bit harder. I mean, still, I was screaming at him like a banshee on Saturday because he was walking.
Is that you, was
it? Yeah. But I do think there's signs that he is sort of getting the message. Put it this way, right? If he was to leave, I think he would be one of the biggest wastes I've ever seen in my Newcastle United supporting life, because he's probably in the top 1, 2, 3 exciting players I've seen in 40 years on Barrack Road. I would put him up there in terms of sheer excitement with your Gazas, genuinely. Not the talent, but exciting to watch. Gaza, obviously Lauren Robert, Hatton Ben Arfa, and I just think it would be a massive, massive waste if he was to move on, because he'll never get a bigger club than us. So yeah, I think give him one more season after this.
Oh, see, I don't think he makes it to next season. Odie, what's your take on it, mate? Are you with Lee? Do you think he needs a chance, mate? Or have you had enough?
I can't believe what I just heard. Lee Foster's gone into bat for Alain Saint-Maximin. I'm genuinely shocked.
He's high off the Wembley. He's high off the Wembley ticket fumes, mate. That's what it is.
There's a couple of things to say. I agree with Lee that game time wise, it's been non-existent pretty much since September. I think you say he did that right at the end of August, or just after the end of August when he got injured against Wolves, and then he was out the side and basically didn't play before the World Cup. I suppose a little bit for me was his performance when he came on in the first day against Southampton. I thought was a really, really good sign of the Saint-Maximin he could become. And to be fair, we're talking about him being disciplined or needing being forward, whatever. That 20 minutes, I thought was absolutely brilliant. And every time he got the ball, he was looking to carry the ball and he was looking to hurt them, because he knew he was up against players who weren't able to accurately adapt to his positions that he would take up and his movement inside and out. And I think it was also made easier because the Southampton defenders were clearly petrified once Isak came on.
Yeah, definitely.
They did not want to be anywhere near him. They didn't want to be left one-on-one with him, and that opened up space for Maxi. However, his performance on Saturday in front of me in the first half was embarrassingly bad. I mean, there was one where he lost the ball, he overran the ball, was down right in front of the Strawberry corner and lost the ball 2 or 3 times, and then was, we'll say, jogging back, but he wasn't jogging back. He was ambling. Actually, that's probably a better word. He was ambling back. And the Gallagher corner Strawberry corner tried to rouse him. They sang his name for, I would say, about 30, 35 seconds. And then he got the ball again, gave it away, and Joe Willock gave away a foul, which immediately gave a dangerous free kick to West Ham. And Joe Willock had to dive in to try and retrieve the ball. And at that point, people around us were like, he can't come back out for the second half. He's playing that badly. We can't have him back out for the second half. Now, you never want to say that about one of your own players because everyone has a stinker at work every so often. My thing is, has Maxi now become that silver bullet off the bench against tired legs where he's so good at carrying the ball forward that in a tight game against weaker opposition, we know we can bring him on. We know he's going to get at them. Man City, I don't think, when we play them at their place, we'll start Kyle Walker at right back against Alain Saint-Maximin because they won't want him to repeat what he did against them up here. That being said, can Saint-Maximin adapt to another different type of play and play a different way to maybe make that work? I don't know. We might get a chance to see it against Liverpool a week on Saturday because he'll be up against another right back who's not necessarily known for his defending, and that might be the time to play him. But I would be very, very, very surprised if Anthony Gordon doesn't start against Bournemouth on Saturday night.
Just on Ginger Plums' comment there, or do you think people have said this as well about moving Maxi over to the right with Trippier behind him? We spoke a little bit before come on about Burn. That was one of the topics we were going to cover until the two new stories broke. But Burn at left back, I think, is still risky because you can't play a winger like Maxi with Burn because it leaves Burn exposed when Burn tries to kind of venture forward a little bit. And there looked like a real disconnection between Burn and Maxi on Saturday. Maxi did very rarely overlap Burn and give him an option out wide. Do you think if he goes over to the right-hand side with trips, do you think we'd see a better return for Maxi, or do you think that's just trying to put square pegs in round holes?
For Alain Saint-Maximin's mental health, I would suggest not putting him anywhere near Kieran Trippier. Because if you tell me that Dan Burn's got a problem with going forward, well, probably our most attacking outlet is Kieran Trippier. And you're telling me that he's going to do the graft that Miggy's doing on the other side. I just don't see it. Something that I read in the Athletic earlier on this week is that every time St. Max runs over or is on target to run in the time he's on pitch over 9 kilometres, his dribble rating just falls through the floor. So when he's doing all that defensive graft, he's not able to have the same explosiveness going forward because he's used up a load of his energy going backwards. And whereas Miguel Almiron seems to be like the Duracell bunny, who we can just keep powering up and at 70 minutes we have to replace him, Maxi, to me, seems to be a player who he's brilliant when he does short bursts of speed.
Yeah.
He's not good at, right, I've just done a sprint up the line and now I'm going to have to sprint back and then I'm going to have to sprint back forward again. And I would imagine Trippier would be horrendous for him to be around because he would be demanding that of him. He sets high standards. You can see when Miguel Almiron makes a mistake or a midfielder makes a mistake in front of Trippier, how much he digs into them and say, whoa, that was you've left me uncovered there. And for Maxi, I just don't think, if we're trying to build his confidence back up, putting him next to Trippier, I don't think would be a good idea. Having said that, I thought it was also interesting the second leg against Southampton. As soon as we went down to 10, Isak was pulled wide left and Maxi was left through the middle. And I thought that was a surefire sign that Howe still does not trust him to graft enough to play in that system. I know we've said we've seen signs of him buying in, and we have. I just don't think Howe sees in him long-term the player. And Lee says give him until next season. I don't think we'll have an option because I don't think anybody's going to pay the sort of money we expect to get rid of him.
I would say, if I can just add, I think if he is away in the summer, I don't think it'll be Eddie Howe who gets him gone in the summer. You've heard interviews with Howe where they've talked about Max. I mean, at the end of the transfer window, he was unequivocal in his message. He's an integral. Now, you hear managers say it all the time, how important players are, but Howe was very, very forthright. He is part of this squad. He's an important part of this squad.
Yeah.
If Max is to leave in the summer, I think it'll be Maxi's ego that gets him a move because of the fact Maxi will not be happy to be a sub anywhere.
Yeah.
In his mind, he's tantamount to Lionel Messi or Cristiano Ronaldo.
He thinks he's Mo Salah. Yeah, he thinks he's Mo Salah or something. He thinks he's that level, doesn't he? Yeah.
And he will not be happy with a bit part piece next season. If he thinks he's just going to be on the substitutes bench for elongated periods of time, he will engineer a move himself. So I don't think, because I still think Howe thinks he can make a player of him. And if Howe thinks that, he'll try and achieve that. But I think if Maxi doesn't see himself getting far, far more game time than he is now, he will engineer a move himself and he'll be off.
Do you know, I think the worst thing for him is probably a good segue into the last point as well about the next game coming up, the Eddie Howe derby. We've got Bournemouth coming up next. The worst thing for Maxi was to probably see Gordon come on and have an immediate impact and do something that got people off the seat, but also was effective in the play. He was strong. He was quick, very quick, way quicker than I even thought he was. And he seemed to get on the level quite quickly as to where to find Callum Wilson. He was knocking balls between him and Willock as well. And I thought he looked really, really sharp. And of course, there was that exuberance from him to come on and do well, to have the impact in his debut. But I think moving into the weekend, or he just might as well get stuck into this now. I agree with you, mate. I think Gordon has to start because the way Maxi played, we spoke about this before, I think he's so worried about keeping Howe and Tyndall's plan in his mind that he's not doing the bits that he does well because he's so worried about, stepping out of the discipline role that he has to do. So I think with Gordon, I think it comes a bit more natural to him. And I think even after that little impact we saw and the week or so's training he's had, and with you, Wardy, I think Gordon's going to start. Do you think the same, mate, for the game against Bournemouth? Do you think he's in?
I think it depends on two things. One, is Isak fit? Because There's always the option that he could bring Isak back in and play Isak or either wide left or wide right and switch maybe the other side. Or he could decide that no, he wants to give Maxi the opportunity, like Lee says, maybe he is fully invested in him and he wants to give him that extra opportunity to prove that maybe that was a one-off. I would start Gordon because I think he's come from an absolutely poisonous atmosphere at Everton.
100%.
And I think we can.
Lee knows he's listened to all the spaces. Lee knows,
but we can talk about the exuberance of like him coming off the bench and the way he was with the atmosphere. And there was an atmosphere. I mean, if I'm honest, the crowd standing up to applaud when the substitution was made, the vast majority, or a large number of them, were doing that for Gordon rather than Maxi. I mean, I don't think that's being unfair, and I'm sure Lee would agree with me that it was the case. Having said that, the biggest thing that stopped us getting the ball and being creative on Saturday was Declan Rice's performance. I mean, if that's him putting himself in the shop window, he did a really, really, really good job of it because Joe Willock barely got a kick first half while he was round Rice. And as soon as they moved Joe Linton on him in the second half, we got a little bit more joy. Now, if we pick Gordon from the start, I think he will look for Wilson. It did worry me how long Callum Wilson took to take that chance right at the end.
Struggling, wasn't he? Yeah.
Well, the first half, he got himself in. As soon as he knew he had a shot at goal, he took it, bang, goal. Second half, he seemed to want that extra touch in the edge of the box. Callum Wilson, when he's in form and full of confidence, doesn't take that extra touch. He puts it past the keeper, we win 2-1. But West Ham did do a really good job of marshalling that defensive line, and they did seem to struggle when Gordon came on because there was far more movement inwards and outwards to help. But I would start him only because we need to see what he's like up against anybody. And we've got Liverpool next, and you need to make a decision. Do you start Maxi? Do you start Gordon?
Interesting. Lee, what do you think about this one, Lee? Do you think that we'll change the formation, as John says there, goes to that 4-2-3-1? I think you mentioned this before already as well, with Joe Linton and Sean Longstaff sitting, ASM in the team, Gordon, Isak and Wilson. Bloody hell, that's a cocktail and a half. John's putting them. I'm not too sure we will, but what do you think?
I genuinely can't say. I think he'll stick to what he knows. I think he's got the personnel to stick to what he knows as well. I think on the Gordon situation, I've seen a lot of people talking about the way how drip fed Bruno and Isak.
And Botman was in and out as well, wasn't he? Yeah.
But the difference between Gordon and those players we've just mentioned is Gordon's come from another Premier League team. He's not come from a foreign league. He knows the division inside out. He's Premier League ready. And I think we saw that for 20 minutes on Saturday. Would agree with Audi 100% when the applause for the substitution was 95% because of the fact that we'd, brought Gordon on. 5% potentially applauding Maxi for his efforts. He was really, really poor. And I think there'll be a lot of disappointed people if Gordon doesn't start. Personally, the only change I can see on Saturday is potentially Gordon for Maxi. I really do think that. I think Wilson was getting into positions on Saturday that he hasn't been getting into for a few weeks, and hopefully that's a sign that he's getting back to full fitness. Because let's be honest, there's something gone on behind the scenes with Wilson in terms of his illness. It's been far worse than any of us have been informed, because he's been blown out of his arse for the past few weeks. But Saturday I saw signs that Wilson was at least getting into those positions that he hasn't been getting into for a few weeks. I think formation-wise, we'll stick with what we've gone with previously. Biggest thing for me, I think, as daft as it might sound, I think that Bruno being out, we might gain a slight advantage because of that, because in the league game in September, Chris Billing, what you call it, was fantastic in the centre of midfield. He's a Bournemouth player that I've rated for a long time, and he bossed that midfield for a large part of that game. Joe Linton coming into midfield, as he did on Saturday, Billing won't get the time, he won't get the space, because Joe Linton will be all over him like a rash. And I think that could work to our benefit, because take Billing out of that midfield and they've not got a great deal in there. So as daft as it sounds, having Joe Linton in there over Bruno on Saturday might be to our benefit, believe it or not.
Just on Joe Linton, Lee, just on that point, I move back to Odie there. Joe Linton's only got 2 more yellow cards before he has a suspension. That's a real worry, that. Obviously, we've got Liverpool after Bournemouth. Would you not be tempted? I mean, they're 19th in the league, Bournemouth. We should be able to beat them with, most of our starting 15, 16, I suppose. Would you not be tempted to take Joe Linton out of firing line and not have him risk that yellow card? Or is he that important that he has to play?
Yeah, for me, I don't think, if you pull him out now, you block off his continuity of performance, and you risk potentially him coming back into Liverpool all guns blazing, wanting to prove how good he is. Well, red card, right? He's missing the final.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
I think probably one of the things that Lee makes a good point about Callum Wilson and them looking a lot sharper, and his illness, which was all very vague and was before the World Cup and then after the World Cup. And he only got, 12 minutes at the World Cup or something. And then he was also training by himself for parts of the World Cup, which I also thought was a bit odd. I think Wilson started by his own self. I have to say, at some point, we're going to have the Wilson Isak decision. If we're going to stick with this system,
definitely.
At some point, the 100%. Wilson Isak decision has to be made. And
that's coming. That's coming. If Isak hadn't got his knocks, I think that decision might have been made already.
Yeah, possibly. I think the Joe Linton midfield, nobody else in our squad offers what Joe Linton offers. And Phil Billen, I think he was at Huddersfield before he was at Bournemouth, and he played against us in the Championship for Huddersfield, and then in both of those seasons, I thought he looked a really good player. He was big, he was strong, hard in the tackle, good passer though, had a decent shot on him. He scored against us obviously for Bournemouth like this season. I'm not necessarily saying we want to go out and buy him and have him as like our 6th choice centre midfielder or whatever, but he made a mockery of a certain other Lord Voldemort lookalike who claimed to be able to run centre midfield before. I think we're in a situation where we've got a decision to make on Joe Linton in terms of like how much you can protect him, but also how much you can rotate. Elliot Anderson looked good in the 15, 20 minutes he came on. He looked all right.
Scared to shoot though, He's scared to shoot though, mate. Chances
young lad coming into the team. I mean, Sean Longstaff wanted to take him like a year after he came in the team to get his fit. Like he scored against Burnley, that absolute raker, and then I think the goals against Southampton were his first goals St James's Park since or something. It was like a 4-year gap, 3-year gap, or whatever it was. So like it does happen. Young players develop at different rates. I think Anderson will kick on, but I think again a bit like Maxi at the minute, he's probably better utilised in 20-30 minutes sub cameos to see where we are against teams if we need to get a goal, or if we're 3-0, 4-0 up right here, son, go and get half an hour. Let's go and see what you're all about. Confidence to go and play. I think the midfield that we've got at the minute of Joe Linton, Joe Willock and Longstaff will play against Bournemouth, and I think they'll play against Liverpool. And my one concern about it is that I don't want them absolutely shattered by the time we get there February 26th. But also, it means we run a bit of a tight walk because, yes, yellow cards only count in the Premier League, but a red card,
that's good. Yellow is
a one-game ban. And against Liverpool, that could be a real risk that some of the players might have. But we've got to take each game as it comes. Like we've literally got to take each game as it comes. I've got a sneaky suspicion, and this is terrible, I was discussing this with someone else this week, I feel like we might be hitting a bit of a drop-off in form at just the wrong time. Spurs' result at the weekend, I feel like massively caught us on the hop. I don't mind the draw against West Ham, actually. I don't think it was 2 points dropped. I thought West Ham put in a really decent defensive performance. They came to try and stop us playing, and when we went 1-0 up, after 15 minutes, Declan Rice kind of took over the game for half an hour. But in the second half, they didn't look like scoring, and the 2 or 3 chances we had, we didn't take. But my worry is we haven't scored in the league. I don't think we've scored 2 goals in a game since Leicester on Boxing Day, which is the first game back. And I don't think we've looked at our fluid best in the league since that game either.
I would argue, if I can, that we've already had a drop-off in form. When you consider Sheffield Wednesday, we didn't play well against Fulham. We had Leeds. We had a draw at home to West Ham. I would argue that we are in the middle and hopefully starting to look at coming out of that drop-off in form. The thing is, that drop-off in form, we didn't lose. We didn't score many goals. We weren't creating a great deal. I'm more of the opinion that we've had that drop in form and we might, fingers crossed, maybe it's wishful thinking, just be starting to come out of that. And Saturday, let's be honest, it's a massive opportunity for us to really sort of steamroller our way out of that drop-off in form, because Bournemouth are not playing well at all. The last 15 games, they've 11 defeats.
Give up on the manager as well. The fans aren't happy with the manager, are they? They're starting to turn.
11 defeats, 2 draws and 2 wins, and the 2 wins are against Everton, which my wife could beat Everton on her own. So let's be honest with you, that's not really the home record. They don't lose many games at home. They've drawn 3, lost 3, and won 4, I think it is. All no, the other way around. They've won 3, drawn 3, lost 4, scored 9, conceded 8. They don't score many goals at home in 10 games. That's 9 goals. For me, if we score first on Saturday, we win the game. Simple as that. If we score first, if we get after them early, scoring the first 10, 15 minutes, I don't see any way back for them. And as I say, come back to my point, I think drop off in form, I think we might see the end of it on Saturday and we might hit a bit of form going into the period where we need to see it.
Could you prediction for the weekend, Lee, quickly? Prediction?
3-1 or 3-0. No, actually, I'm going to go 3-0. They've got Kiefer Moore up front. He's not getting any change out of Botman. He's not getting any change out of Shaw. So I can't see them scoring. Their alternative to Kiefer Moore is Semenyo, who's, just been signed from Christ knows where in the Championship, I think it was. I can't remember where it was. So no, I'm genuinely, I'm confident for Saturday. I'm going to go 3-0.
Yeah, you've just upset Di there as well by slagging off Kiefer Moore Ballon d'Or, as Di calls him.
He's a poor man's Chris Wood.
Oh, that's it. Di's definitely not totally after this, mate. But Audie, for you, mate, prediction, are you as confident as Lee?
I'm not as confident as Lee. The League Cup fourth round game against them, which was a bit of a struggle for us. I see the game being a bit like that. Although, to be fair, that was literally the first game back after the World Cup, and everyone was just kind of feeling their way back into it. I think we'll win. I think it's likely to be 1-0. Maybe I'll go and have some of Lee's glass half full, and I'll be 2-0. My worry is at the moment is that we're just not scoring goals, and I know we shouldn't be, but all of us have naturally got one eye on events in 2 weeks on Sunday. And I noticed that our opposition on that day have suddenly started scoring goals pretty much for fun. I think we do need to have, and I hope Lee's right, I think we do need to have a game where we get this out of our system. If it's not Bournemouth, I need it to be Liverpool, because what I don't want us to do is arrive on a run of draws that is so long that we haven't had a win, bar the cup games that we haven't had a win in ages. And you'd want there to be 3 points, either, well, preferably this week and next week. But if we don't pick up 3 points this week, we definitely need to pick up 3 points next week.
Absolutely. Lee, you want to add something, mate, just before?
Yeah, just a couple of things. couple of things. Watch out for Saturday night, 67th minute, because really interestingly boring fact is the fact that both of the goals we've scored this season against Bournemouth were scored in the 67th minute. One was an own goal. And
he has been doing his homework tonight, hasn't he? Well done.
Penalty. But no, to be serious, you talked about the fact that we struggled in the league game and in the home game. Bournemouth came to Newcastle in September and they did a job on us. They came thinking if we can get away with a point, we'll be happy. League Cup, they played for penalties. And we managed to, what you call it, fortunately get an own goal. They will not be able to come with that low block mentality on Saturday in front of their own fans. Their own fans won't allow it. They also are desperate for points, the second bottom of the league. If they go into that game and sit back and invite us onto them, their fans they'll be all over them. They will. So that's genuinely the reason why I think they'll have to come at us. And with the pace we've got, I just think we'd have far too much for them. And Christ, I'm never confident. Don't piss on me chips, lads. But I've just got this feeling on Saturday that we're going to click, and I think we're going to get a comfortable win for once. I genuinely do. Bournemouth will not play the same approach that they played in September and in December against us at St James's Park.
I'm just waiting for you to pull a mask off and it's your lad under the mask, mate. He's winding us up. It says lad in disguise. Sorry,
anything happened today, Lee, that's made you more confident?
Something slightly might have changed in it today. Yeah, what a day it's been, mate. What a day it's been. You know, I do agree with what you're saying, Lee. I think that I've seen some of the Bournemouth fans on Twitter, etc., and they're really not happy with Gary O'Neill. They've really turned against him, and they have to do something. If they just sit back and allow us to press them, their fans will turn very, very quickly. I'm going the same as Oli. I'm going for 2-0. But I think, as much as we've just loaded Gordon, Isak's key. If Isak is back in that squad, he gives us another dynamic. If Wilson's struggling, like he has been struggling, then I think Isak definitely gives us something to win that game. I think if Isak had been fit at the weekend, we might have won that game. I really do believe that.
You've both just made me sound like an absolute raging lunatic for suggesting 3-0. And you're both going for 2-0.
2-0.
I said 1-0. I said 1-0.
All right.
1-0. I'm good 2-0. I'm good 2-0. But I think, I think Isak is key because we have got out of the bench players. There's nobody on there. Obviously, Gordon came on the other week. There's nobody really on there who's going to make as big of an impact in the game. I think Isak can make. And as Audie rightly says, if he keeps doing that, sooner or later, they're going to have that big conversation about who do you start, Wilson or Isak. And I think if Isak gets back sharp and fit and Touchwood has no more knocks to the head or whatever, I think he will be getting that starting berth soon. And if he does come on and make an impact at the weekend, he maybe gets to start against Liverpool. Maybe he ousts Wilson for the final. Mark's saying 3-0. He's come off the fence this week because he had splinters in his arse last week. We were giving him loads of jip for that. But yeah, I think for me, lads, I think a 2-0 win. Then we've got Liverpool up next, as Audie says. We'll talk about that one more and ever more that week. But it's two big games and a chance to get the confidence right up, lads, for the final. So let's start as we mean to carry on at the weekend. So that's us all wrapped up for this week from me and the lads. Thank you so much to everybody who's tuned in. We always appreciate it. It really helps the channel flow. As I mentioned at the start, if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button. Come and join us. We've got loads of room for you here. 2 live shows Mondays and Wednesdays and pop-up videos as well. Transfer rumours, bit of crack about this, that, and every other thing. So keep it ever more. Loads of Newcastle United chat to come. Let's keep supporting that team. We'll call United, and we'll catch you later. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.